a massive disruption hit the tech industry. Chinese AI startups released language models matching Western performance, doing it at a fraction of the cost. This chart shows exactly what that looks like for a developer. If you run a standard monthly workload through Anthropic's Claude, it costs roughly $380. Route that exact same workload through DeepSeek v3, and your bill is $18. You might have seen headlines claiming DeepSeek trained this entire model for a miraculous $5.6 million. In reality, that figure only covers the electricity and compute for one final training run. It leaves out years of failed experiments, developer salaries, and a GPU fleet valued at over $1.6 billion. If you are running a tech company today, you are under immense pressure to slash your operating costs. Switching your backend to these cheap APIs looks like an easy win on this quarter's balance sheet. But integrating foreign infrastructure into your core product carries quiet, long-term risks. Leveraging these low prices requires balancing immediate savings against the dependencies of foreign AI infrastructure. We asked 3 leading AI models how these low prices are possible. Kimi freely admits to loss-leading for market share and developer lock-in. Claude counters, highlighting a massive trust gap and noting that prices are already starting to creep up. To decide if these APIs belong in your tech stack, we must evaluate 3 specific factors: engineering efficiency forced by hardware bans, the aggressive business strategy driving pricing, and the risks of offshoring data. You have to strip away the viral hype and look at the physical and economic realities making these rock-bottom prices possible. The cost war actually starts with hardware constraints. The United States placed strict export bans on selling top-tier computing chips to China. Deprived of the industry-standard NVIDIA H100s, Chinese AI labs were forced to train their models on throttled H800 chips, hardware deliberately weakened to cut data transfer speeds in half. Facing this bottleneck, Chinese engineers rewrote their training process. They utilized highly efficient low-level coding and relied on 8-bit math instead of the standard 16 or 32-bit arithmetic, squeezing maximum output from restricted silicon. They aggressively implemented an architecture called mixture of experts. Instead of firing up the entire trillion-parameter model, only 3% activates for a specific task. For a different query, a different tiny slice lights up, burning vastly less electricity and memory. The software optimization here is a real technical achievement, born out of necessity. But engineering around a handicap is still a handicap. Building an entire ecosystem on physically constrained older hardware creates severe bottlenecks for the massive scaling required in the future. Technical efficiency only explains a fraction of the cost drop. The rest is pure business strategy. What is happening in AI right now perfectly mirrors China's playbook for dominating the solar panel and electric vehicle industries. The tactic is simple: absorb the core technology, engineer a highly efficient production process, and rely on venture capital and state support to price the final product below the actual cost of operation. The goal is volume. By giving the models away for practically nothing, they aim to capture the global developer ecosystem, making international startups reliant on Chinese foundation models. The danger for developers is that this loss leader phase always ends. The discounts won't last forever, and we are already seeing this happen. Moonshot's newest model currently costs 5 times more per query than its predecessor did at launch. American AI labs have to price their APIs to recover tens of billions of dollars in private research and development. Without state subsidies to fall back on, they simply cannot match these prices. Migrating your company to these cheap APIs might extend your financial runway this year, but in exchange, you are surrendering long-term pricing predictability and anchoring your product to a subsidized foreign ecosystem. The manufacturing analogy breaks down because AI models function as persistent digital services rather than one-time physical shipments. When you use a Chinese AI API, your company's proprietary data and your customers' live queries are constantly flowing into infrastructure that operates outside of Western regulatory and legal frameworks. Compounding that privacy concern is the total opacity of the training data. The origins of the billions of tokens remain completely undisclosed, alongside widespread allegations that they were trained by scraping the outputs of Western competitors. Then there is the geopolitical reality. At any moment, new tariffs, sudden export controls, or strict geo-blocking could instantly sever your access to your core tech stack. This threat is especially acute for developers in the global south, like India. They face a massive pincer movement, dirt-cheap Chinese AI inputs on one side, and American models automating away their traditional IT service exports on the other. If emerging economies build entirely on top of foreign infrastructure, they risk becoming permanent downstream consumers instead of independent builders of their own foundational technology. You might save 90% on your compute bill today, but for a mature business, that savings is offset by fatal compliance hurdles and geopolitical vulnerabilities. This flowchart maps out how to make this decision. It comes down to one question: are you handling regulated or proprietary data? If you fit a low-risk profile, indie developers, early-stage prototypes, or consumer apps, the answer is no. In this scenario, you should absolutely exploit these cheap Chinese APIs to stretch your runway. But you must build your architecture to be model agnostic, ensuring you can swap to a different provider the minute those subsidized prices spike. If you fit a high-risk profile, enterprise firms, defense contractors, healthcare, or any company processing sensitive user data, the answer is yes. You must absorb the higher costs of providers like OpenAI and Anthropic, or invest in deploying local open-source models. Your business requires strict IP protection and absolute regulatory compliance, and cheap APIs cannot provide that. The higher compute cost you pay a Western lab is essentially an insurance premium. It protects you from having your infrastructure turned off by a sudden trade dispute. Cheap AI is a wildly powerful commodity. Use it to build faster and test cheaper. Just ensure your business never becomes a captive user locked inside a subsidized trap.